Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Welcome to our global telepresence conversation about smart cities. My name is Gordon Feller. I'm here in San Jose, California, in Silicon Valley at Cisco headquarters. I'm a director at Cisco Systems, and I'll serve as your moderator for this 90-minute session. We're pleased to have you joining us in both Europe, in Amsterdam particularly, and in the United States. We have 5 cities who are joining us via telepresence, but we also want to welcome our webcast participants who are joining us on the webcast. And we'll be recording this event for posterity and for your children and grandchildren to be able to see if there are pearls of wisdom that need to be saved for eternity. This is the day to do it. So we want you to know that it'll be available as video on demand if you have any colleagues and friends that should be sent to visit with this particular 90-minute event. Our purpose today is to really ask some questions. And one critical question that we're asking is about the ingredients for success. That is, a successful city like Amsterdam, who have worked very hard for a long time to become a successful city, who have strived to become smarter and better connected and more equitable. We want to be able to understand what are the key ingredients for the success of such cities. And we have other cities here represented who are going to be able to share their secret ingredients, their secret sauce for that recipe. But we've had the benefit of a day-long program, the Minds of Amsterdam, which has taken place all day today. We're at the close of that program during this 90-minute session, and we thought it would be useful to start by circling around North America to welcome the people who are joining us from various U.S. cities, and then we'll go back to the stage in Amsterdam. So first I'll start with our friends in Boston and ask Cliff Thomas to give us his name and his title and his affiliation, and then to have his colleagues in Boston do that, and then we'll go to Michigan. So first, Cliff, you, and then your colleagues.
Sure. Cliff Thomas here with Cisco Systems, Managing Director that looks after our America's go-to-market and sales strategy for smart connected communities.
I'm Phil Primack. I'm a consultant to the Bar Foundation, which helps support Meeting of the Minds.
And I'm Joel Oliker. I'm CEO of Powderhouse Productions. We're a media creation and development company servicing American public television and global cable networks.
Thank you, Boston. And now to Michigan, Greater Detroit, Michigan. We have, I think, 7 participants on that side, and we'll go around the room in Michigan. Who wants to say hello?
They're on.
Sorry about that. We had our microphone muted.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Greg Donnelly. I'm the director of the Detroit Revitalization Fellows Program at Wayne State University in Detroit, in the Midtown area.
I'm Daniela Kuzan from Next Energy. We're a technology accelerator focused on advanced energy commercialization. My focus is on connectivity and specifically around transportation energy.
I'm Doug Kuto. I'm a consultant and a senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government. I'm the former CIO of the Michigan Transportation Department and the past chair of the IT Committee of the Transportation Research Board. So I kind of look at transportation and technology at all levels.
I'm Benji Kennedy. I'm a senior program officer with the Kresge Foundation. We're a national philanthropic institution committed to expanding opportunities in America's cities. We have a special interest in the city of Detroit and do a lot of our grant making right here in the city.
Bradford Frost, the director of the Woodward Corridor Initiative, which is part of the Living Cities Integration Initiative.
I'm Paul Tolliver, the director of the City of Detroit's Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Paul, and everybody else from Detroit. And now Washington, D.C. Would you introduce yourselves? We're skipping Washington, and so we'll go to San Jose and to the Missouri room in San Jose, California. And maybe Dave Hahn, you want to be the first to introduce after you unmute.
Sure. I'm Dave Hahn. I'm the Director of Communications for Meeting of the Minds, and I'm glad to see everybody here today. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name is Patrick Consorti. I work for the Paris region mission in the U.S. and working on open innovation.
And I'm Hugo van Meyenveld. I'm a boy from Amsterdam. Was on law school over there. I'm still an Ajax soccer fan. But now I'm here in San Francisco, comparable city, and I'm here joining and heading the Dutch community, highlighting in innovation on water, urban development, and transportation.
Well, thanks to all of you for being quick introducers, self-introducers. Now let me introduce Bas Boersma, my colleague, a director at Smart and Connected Communities in Cisco Systems based in Amsterdam. And Bas is there with the conference participants in Amsterdam, and he'll introduce somebody sitting next to him. So the table is yours, Bas.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gordon. And Wim, will you join me on stage? Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce this remarkable executive from Cisco. Okay. Wim is Executive Vice President at Cisco. He is also the Chief Globalization Officer at Cisco. And emerging is probably one of the main topics in this man's career. Emerging industries, emerging solutions, emerging markets. Very, very passionate about what he saw many, many years ago happening in India, in China. He took that to Cisco's chairman and CEO, Mr. John Chambers, and John said, well, Wim, if you're that passionate about these markets, why don't you go there? Mm-hmm. So he actually went to India. He lived for years in Bangalore, built the most innovative and single largest campus that we have beyond California, turned that into a formidable success. And while being operating from there, he started the Smart Plus Connected Communities initiative, working on smart cities. He's been doing that for 5 years. He is running the Internet of Everything portfolio at Cisco, the Internet of Things portfolio, the smart city programs at Cisco. Wim, I've heard the question asked here during the afternoon session, are smart cities real? If you look back at your 7 years and you look at where we currently stand, what's the score?
Wow. 7 years into it, and the first 3 years were not easy because everybody tried to shut it down. Is smart city something real? Is it just infrastructure? Are citizens really benefiting from it? Have we made progress? It's a question that I often get, and I dare to say at the moment that it is real. Why is it real? When I lived in India, that lived in Bangalore, a city where around 600 people a day come to the city. Can you imagine? 600 new citizens every day. That means that you need a new school every month. You need a new hospital every quarter. Physically, that is not going to happen. And so that was the reason that we said, that what can technology do? What can technology enable? And technology is not the solution, but technology can drive a lot of innovation and new concepts. And so we started around the world with smart cities, mainly on infrastructure, the utilities, integrated operations centers, but that's not sexy. That's not something that citizens benefit from immediately. If you look now, we have 5 years in the smartphone world. We are 5 years in the tablets. That we talk about cloud computing. And suddenly, the citizens are going to benefit via applications, smartphone applications, apps. Some data points that at this moment, on a weekly basis, there are 100 movies released worldwide, 100 movies, 250 books, and 15,000 apps. 15,000 apps. Since this morning, for the time you're here now, 10 million apps have been downloaded. More than 2 million devices are newly connected to the internet. I'm wearing one of the new items, the wristband, healthcare. People buy this, but the real use is the app. I live in California. My wife is quite sporty, and with her friends, they all have targets nowadays. 10,000 steps, so many calories. It's very measurable. And for the first time, normally in the evening when I'm home, we always had an argument who's going to let the dogs out. Now she volunteers because she didn't make her steps. But that's just a side effect. But coming back to the whole world of apps and technology, we call that the Internet of Things. It's real at this moment. Around 30 million devices are being connected every week. And that we predict that by the end of the decade, we will have around 50 billion apps. How do we benefit from that? At this moment in cities, any idea what the killer app is? Who dares to make one of them? Absolutely. In Netherlands, in the Netherlands, that's the buienradar. But that's typical. That's the weather. We like to talk about it. It's unpredictable. But from a business point of view, that's one of the most used apps. And the killer app for specifically mayors of cities are parking services. Parking services. Because it's the second source of revenue for most cities. It's the most irritating thing for citizens to find parking places. And that an average citizen in Paris spends 4 years of his life finding a parking place. So that's really, but next to that, as a killer app, you get lighting services, and you get more and more planning in neighborhoods, that people participate, the participative democracy. That you get involvement. This morning that we talked about open data, and that citizens are getting access to information and do some things with that. And so the benefits are quite real at the moment. And that 30% energy saving is achievable in a lot of cities. Crime reduction, because there is more sustainability between economic values, social values, and environmental type of values. If people are more happy, crime rates go down. Water usage, that's reductions of 50%. A city like Singapore is already water neutral. They call it from toilet to tap. Perhaps that's not the right marketing slogan, but are achievable things. And that if you also think about it, the future of competition is going to be between cities. It was what it was in history. The Hanse cities. I was in Hamburg this morning. It's Amsterdam versus New York, San Francisco. And we work together, but cities are organisms that become more efficient if they become bigger. And so my whole statement, and the point I want to make is that technology enables solutions for citizens. Daily type of irritations, like I said, inclusive democracy, planning, it's real. It's happening every day. Is there anybody here in the audience who doesn't use all apps? Everybody's using things? Is using apps? I have 2 boys in California, two sons, 14 and 17 years old. They have 2 statuses in life now. They are asleep or they are online. And whether you like it or not, it's the new way of learning. And my boy went back to high school a couple of weeks ago, and my wife said, "Did you pick up your books?" And you should have seen, that was the dumbest question ever. Because they have no books anymore. We are getting prisoners at my age specifically of your own experiences. And I love to write, I love to read, I love the newspaper, but the new generation is rising without it. And so they don't even know what they are missing. And so smart cities, of course, it's all about architecture and buildings and open places, but there is a lot of knowledge around that. And cities are more likable or not, or more livable. But to really get citizen satisfaction and benefits, economic power, and ability to attract business, the competition for young people starts. And that's because we are in an aging, shrinking population. young people can move. In which city do they want to live? At this moment, we have unemployment, but decades from now, we will have shortages. And so where do young people want to live? Is it a safe environment? And all these type of things are better and better enabled via technology. And we call that the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything. Open data is just getting started. It will really, I think, cause a revolution. So, coming back to Amsterdam, that's, I really have appreciated Amsterdam. And for me, it's, Caroline, one of the cities that probably is best in collaboration. And I think you practiced that this afternoon. Collaboration. If you can't collaborate, you can't run a smart city. That you have to do things together. Creating platforms. So congratulations with the whole new initiative. That you have to create these platforms and to bring people together. Because it's going to be something that the industry has to do together. That as industry, we have to provide global open standards to make it affordable, to make it accessible. And we still have 2 billion people on the planet who have no access to education, healthcare, live off $1 a day, inclusive growth, and make things affordable for people to benefit from it. Amsterdam, I think, is mastering bringing people together and creating these platforms, starting to create conglomerates of companies, of initiatives. We talked about public-private partnerships. I think we will talk more and more in the future about public-private participations. That you also put as a company the money where your mouth is, and you want to get some return out of it. And so if you look at this moment, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, Bas, and to round up the question, that probably the better cities are somewhere on a 6. It's still a long way to go. But the cities who don't embrace the smart concepts and create these platforms and come up with thought leadership and a vision are going to lag behind economically, socially, environmental. And like I said, young people will not join these cities. So public-private partnerships are happening as we speak. Amsterdam is a great example. Smart regulation. Does the public sector have that vision to enable all these initiatives? And I always use as an example that when I came back from India to California, new house, big house, I had 2 boys, never clean their room, never switch off power, and it's always the lights on. So we had a humongous electricity bill. And I created the dashboards, we had a 10% reduction. Now I give them 50% of the savings. Problem is solved. And so public sector can do a lot with smart regulation, Caroline, and coming up with incentives to drive energy reduction and all the other things that we talked about. But I still think that probably the most important thing is building ecosystems. And as an industry also, that we have that obligation, that at the moment we have the big crisis in the world with NSA, it's a scandal. And that's the bad news. The good news is that you recognize that, and that you accept it. That means that you have to start driving it. And if we really want to further get the benefits of the internet, as an industry, as public sector, we have to solve this. And that security, privacy are going to be the big impediments for the future development of all these things that we can benefit from. So, Bas, in conclusion, I think it's real, and that it's happening, and that there is a conference in the world every day. But even more important, results are achievable, and results are manageable and can be published. And I think Gordon later will come back to that. What are the tangibles in the different type of cities? To really not just win the prize as the smartest city, but what is the return? How do citizens benefit from it? Because that's ultimately the objective.
Thank you, Wim. Let's get a response from another very special person in this room. Madam Deputy Mayor, Caroline Geels, would you want to join us? Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you.
You've got an incredible portfolio. You run cultural affairs, you run economic affairs, you run city marketing, you run water management.
Yep.
The list is just too long, and the prime question in my mind is, how do you manage all of that? But that's actually not the question I'm going to ask you. My first question to you is Wim right? Do you by and large agree with the way he presents the world around smart cities?
Yes, Wim is right. And the key word is collaboration, cooperation, also with my portfolio. It's a beautiful combination of being a very attractive city by arts and culture, inspiring people, entrepreneurial people. That's the reason why economic affairs is very important. And when you talk about water or waste or mobility, you talk about the systems of the city. And when you cooperate in that, you can improve. And the citizens will benefit from it, for example, indeed by parking apps. But when we think in terms of circular economy, I think it's just the beginning. For example, we make energy out of waste, but waste doesn't exist. Waste is another raw material to make new things, for example, plastic or textile or wood or steel. And when you are very smart, you identify the different pieces in your garbage bag and make new things out of it. So you really are going into a new circular economy from which all the citizens will benefit.
Fantastic. We've got two different sides here of this particular effort of driving smart cities. We've got the public side, we've got the private side. This morning we had a number of great presentations around smart cities and Smart City 2.0, pointing out that business is taking a different role, is looking for more partnership, more collaboration, that in fact entire ecosystems are emerging of public and private players working together in order to drive smart city projects. How do you see that evolve? May I start with you first, Wim?
Yeah, I think creating budget that is going to be a key challenge, because a lot of investments don't have a payoff. And in the first, if you really talk about infrastructure, if you talk about smart grid, if you talk about the different utilities and trying to create one platform, that are investments that have to be written off over 10, 20 years. And so how do you create funds? This morning, I think it was mentioned what we have done in Israel, that really built infrastructure, broadband, we call it profit for peace, that participation, creating jobs, that education. So I think you start seeing different models around the world now, that's with public-private participations and not just partnerships, that you start creating also concessions. And that instead of 20-year concessions, you go back to 3 years. And so I see also in smart cities that with different cultures, that China is different than Western Europe, the US, we'll talk to them. You see 5 business models emerging. That's some parts of the world do it this way. Digital rights, who owns the monetization of fiber, of Wi-Fi. You see around 5 models arising of public-private partnerships, participations. Chicago has funded trusts now with concessions of 4 years. And so in smart city concept, monetization strategies and creating budget is going to be one of these creative things that a city leads or it stays behind.
Thank you, Wim. Caroline.
Yeah, I still remember, Gordon, the first day we met. It was 1.5 years ago. I was in San Francisco. And then you asked me that question. Why is it so natural for the Dutch to cooperate? And then I explained we had to, because we had to keep the water out. And we had to cooperate because it's impossible to make a dike or a levee on your own. And I think that's a very important notion. I always explain that the 3 crosses of Amsterdam are the struggle against fire, against diseases, and against water. And that's a collective problem for the community as a whole. And that's the reason why I think that now, for example, in New York, after Sandy, there's a Dutch approach as well. As a community, you cannot save your own village or your own city. You have to cooperate. So that's key. Second, be open. Open infrastructure, open digital infrastructure, public access. We as a government facilitated that in a participation together with companies, but it's open and accessible to everybody. So I think the balance here between public and private power is good, and sometimes I think maybe we need more government because you pay it all together. For example, by taxes. And I know that's very difficult in the United States. But take the example of the Amsterdam parking policy. In 2008, I was 2 years in City Hall at the time, we raised the parking rates in the city center from 3 to 5 euro. So it was immense. A lot of protests, a lot of people complaining. But after 2-3 months, people started getting more happy because some of them took the bicycle, some of them took public transport. Others said, well, I have to pay more, but there's always a parking place for me. So I paid at 5 euros, but I can park my car in front of the door. And we had specific rates for electric vehicles. So we have an immense network now for electric vehicles. So with taxes, the price instrument, you can govern the city and try to change the behavior of the people. And I think when you're really a smart city and you look to mobility, for example, here with the canals, we have very small streets. We have a lot of vans. But when you know that maybe some of the goods are going by water, for the hotels, for example, and not everything, not the fresh fish, but maybe the things that are needed weekly. So you can be more smart in your transport systems. But you can only be smart when you have funds on which you all can rely. And taxation is a way of financing things who are good for the whole community.
Thanks, Caroline. Wim, we know you have to leave in just a few minutes, but I would like to have at least one more question for you, and using your mind in this meeting of the mind session in order to address the issue of smart cities further. The Chinese have a saying, crisis is opportunity, challenge is opportunity. What do you see today as the biggest challenge in smart city development and the overall emergence of the Internet of Everything? And is that challenge also possibly an opportunity?
Two things. At first, in an aging, shrinking society, that already alluded a little bit to that being prisoners of your own experience. And that if you see at this moment 100 new cities of 1 million people and more are being built as greenfield. And that's, I always say that God was able to create the world in 7 days because there was no installed base. And so these cities have a complete open mind, starts from scratch. And that's in India, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, 1,000 miles, 24 cities are going to be built from the ground up with best practices from around the world. And they will do things that you haven't seen before. And so in Europe, that we want to study all these things, understand it deeply, and we have to maintain the speed. And so it is, experimentation, proof of concepts, try things out, exchange best practices like we're doing here today, I think is critical. And so an open mind is an absolute necessity and can be an impediment if you're not careful. And secondly, I already called that security and privacy. And at the moment we have a crisis around that in the world. It's about trust. That is something between the public-private sector we have to absolutely solve. Otherwise we will totally slow down the enablement for technology to come up with solutions.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wim Elfrink.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the room for questions, but also to a dialogue with the cities that we have in the US. We have the pleasure and honor of having Caroline with us for the next half an hour or 1 hour even, if you have the time. That's great. And the first thing that I would like to do in order to get us to that discussion is to invite two people on stage that will report on this afternoon session all the things that you have created and that will help fire the discussion and take that to the US. The two people that I would like to invite on stage are, first of all, Mark Vernooy. Can I have you back on stage?
Thank you.
Thanks. And Ger, if you're all wired up, then I would like to invite you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there's no one in this room who does not know him. Ger Baron, there is not a person that is more innovative, harder working at driving innovations in Amsterdam. He's also one of the main driving forces for this conference, actually. A little applause for Ger.
Actually, I agreed with Bas that Bas is not allowed to do any introductions for me anymore, but you always take the opportunity, so thank you, Bas.
Great. Gentlemen, can I get some feedback from you on this afternoon session? And I don't know where I should start. Maybe we can start out with Ger with a number of general observations, and then we can take it to Mark for the work done in the afternoon. Ger, can I start with you?
Yeah, so maybe, I think there were loads of things we saw this morning. What I particularly liked, and also maybe it's interesting to get a bit of feedback from other cities, were a few issues, I think. And maybe the first one was the issue of trust. And when you talk about collaboration, like the Dutch do so good, as Deputy Mayor explained, we also have an issue of trust in collaborations and how the public sector works with private sector, how people work together and everything. And I think it was pretty well stressed out this morning that this is one of the main things we should discuss and organize and change the governance and create vehicles basically to organize these things. And well, the AMS Institute, as we saw this morning, maybe is a vehicle to do these things basically. But I wonder how this works in other cities. How do you create the collaborative models basically and make sure trust is in place?
Fantastic, Ger. Thank you very much. Mark.
So I really like that we're here together with a quite diverse group of people, and people from government side, people who are working in academia, people from the private sector. And we really worked together as one big team on a couple of challenges and had a look at all those challenges that we face, because despite the fact we're doing a lot of real cool stuff here in Amsterdam, we always want to do more, and we're naturally ambitious in a sense to be more entrepreneurial and get more stuff off the ground. And there were 4 big themes that were coming out. And one is, how do we make cities even more livable than they are? Or how do we keep cities livable with more people coming in, more pollution, as we see in some big cities in China, but we face it here in Western Europe as well. How do we help the government adapt towards a different kind of role? If we see society changing, if we see citizens taking a lot more ownership, taking a lot more things in their own hands, then what is the role of the government? And how can we help the government do that? The third topic that came up was tapping into the potential of citizens. There is so much potential, and now with, as Wim said, the Internet of Everything being here, smart cities being here, there's a big role for citizens to play. And there's huge opportunity if we give them the platforms, if we help them do whatever they want to do and what they think is needed. And then the final discussion we had was around the gap between science and society, where sometimes science is quite far away from where we need our solutions right now. And where that discussion went was very much around making sure that whenever we work in science, we have a good view of the end user. So we always do it with the end user in mind, instead of having a technology push kind of approach. So those were the 4 topics that were quite abundantly discussed this afternoon.
Fantastic. I'm sure that there's plenty of questions that we can formulate for ourselves as part of this audience and as part of what you just said and all the work done here. But I would first like to pass the ball and floor and microphone back to Gordon in the United States and to see if we can solicit some discussion based on the content that we have brought into the international telepresence meeting that we have here. Gordon.
Thanks. Thank you, Buzz, and thanks to our friends in Amsterdam. That was very helpful for us as a ground point to begin a discussion. And I'd like to maybe start by going back to something that was mentioned, I think, by Wim or maybe by Caroline. It was a theme that both of them touched on, and I'd like to ask maybe Detroit to give us their first comments on this. The question was framed, and I wrote it down, what's the return? I'm assuming it was, what's the return on investment? What are the citizen benefits going to be? And we've heard some of that described around smart parking, around smart transportation, around smart systems that the city is enabling with new technology investments. And I'd like to be able to contrast this with a challenge that Detroit has, which is in the midst of a bankruptcy process. It's an extreme situation perhaps in North America, but not really that fundamentally different than a lot of other cities, post-industrial cities, who are facing big challenges in the revitalization of their economy and the re-engagement with their citizens. So not to put anybody on the spot per se, but maybe Benji, you have at Kresge Foundation a view of the broad framework that Detroit is trying to create for the next economy and the next Detroit emerging out of the bankruptcy. Perhaps starting with you and then going around the table in Detroit to get feedback on the questions that have been discussed in Amsterdam as we've just heard them.
Sure. Thanks, Gordon. So, look, what's the return to the individual, to the resident of Detroit, of all the pain and the suffering of a bankruptcy and all the investment and collaboration and all the heavy lifting? I think the return is very simple. It's a quality of life return. I mean, this is fundamentally the work that we do at the Kresge Foundation, and I would argue the work that we do in collaboration with other nonprofits and the public sector here in Detroit is about improving quality of life for all residents of our city and of our region, and expanding economic opportunity, life opportunities for those individuals. So everything that we do sort of points at that, overarching objective. I think in addition to that, Gordon, Wim said something interesting. He said that the future of competition is between cities. So in a lot of ways, we have no choice but to adopt a smart city agenda, to sort of reconceptualize our physical plan, to reconsider the future of our city economically and otherwise, because we here in Detroit have to compete. We have to compete with Boston and San Jose, and we have to compete with Amsterdam. We have to compete with Grand Rapids right on the other side of the state. So, again, a lot of what we're doing is simply that, is simply positioning Detroit to be more competitive and ensuring that Detroit is able to win these competitions with other places for jobs, for investment, for economic opportunities, so that its residents can benefit.
So you're sitting with Paul Tolliver, who's representing the city and the transportation department. Paul, you may not know all the details of what Amsterdam is doing in the transportation arena, but their formula, as I see it as an outside observer, is they're embracing innovative technology as an early adopter, and they're deploying those technologies in multiple neighborhoods, not just rich neighborhoods where the tourists hang out, but in not so rich neighborhoods where, for instance, you have immigrant communities. And this is a challenge Detroit faces. Obviously, you have the downtown core, which is experiencing revitalization with the emergence of young tech-centered jobs and companies, but then you have the neighborhoods that don't necessarily always benefit from those. Can you give us a picture of how the city government, your department, and maybe the rest of the city government is trying to embrace new technology and new innovation while at the same time distributing the benefits as widely as possible?
I'll give you my best answer. I want to thank Madam Vice Mayor from Amsterdam for the Dutch model. We are looking at that, and we, maybe like Amsterdam, were kind of forced into that because of this bankruptcy. We have no choice now but to cooperate. We are looking at new technologies to help us get back to a point where we provide basic services the way we should provide them, not anything beyond that at this point. So the citizen benefits by us just restoring basic expected services like public transportation, like street lighting and fixing city streets. So one of the ways we're looking at that is using these new technologies where we can maybe skip a few generations to bring us into the 21st century, where we don't have to go in a step-by-step progression, where we are looking at apps, for instance, to help our citizens see what time the next bus is coming down the street. Now, we may not have the infrastructure set up totally right now to show every bus on the system, but for those buses where we do have a working GPS system, the citizen will see that bus so that when they are in the cold, they will know when that bus is coming. As we seek to restore our basic infrastructures, like fixing basic buses, getting them back on the street, making sure they are running on time, we hope to have a parallel activity at the same time, proceeding with new technologies that allow us to put all of our basic city services in the hands of our citizens, not just the bus services, but the ability to know where our power systems are working or not working, street lights are working or not working. I like the smart parking apps. All of the new technologies are going to be, we hope, in the city of Detroit, a part of our revitalization at the same time as we seek to restore just the basic infrastructure that will allow the Internet of Things to actually take hold in the city of Detroit. So we're working with a lot of good partners, Kresge Foundation, the M1, a new public-private, a privately led investment in a rail system in downtown Detroit. That is a major boon, and the public sector is cooperating with them to make sure that that happens. So a lot of ways that we in the public sector are working with the private sector in collaboration, cooperation, to make things happen.
Well, it sounds like there might be a collaboration opportunity between Amsterdam and Detroit, and hopefully when the Meeting of the Minds convenes September 30th, October 1, October 2 in Detroit, we'll get a group of people from Amsterdam there spending quality time looking at what kinds of initiatives are happening in Detroit that have relevancy for Amsterdam and vice versa. Maybe one of those is the Woodward Corridor Initiative, and Brad Frost, maybe you can describe for those who don't know what the story of the Woodward Corridor Initiative is, if there's maybe some short description that you can give people that help explain what it's all about and how it represents a collaboration opportunity for Detroit.
Sure. So the Woodward Corridor Initiative is a cross-sector approach involving philanthropy, nonprofits, private business startups, and the public sector to revitalize the Woodward Corridor, which is the spine of the greater downtown in Detroit, and to test innovative ways to really create a stronger enabling environment for small business development, to partner with what we call community anchors, hospitals and universities on local hiring, and to try and facilitate the redensification of the greater downtown. And so what we've learned over the last couple of years in testing this initiative is, in certain ways, a lot of the challenge here is under-promising and over-delivering. So the best we can do is enhance those public services in those districts that are thriving, provide a safe and attractive environment for people to come and visit, as well as to live and study and work, and to really focus on the methodological points, right? So the ingredients are largely the same in many other cities, but by successfully executing a lot of these change strategies and building a credible portfolio of work across those sectors, we create higher degrees of trust and greater opportunities for leverage and collaboration moving forward.
Just move to the left or the right so we can see you, because the split screen has broken your brain in half. Thank you. So we see a good example of public-private partnerships. And I before we move to Boston, I want to maybe just ask whoever there in Detroit, perhaps somebody who hasn't yet had a chance to speak, a lot of us looking from the outside to the situation in Detroit, whether we're sitting in Amsterdam or here in California, we're a bit despondent. We not only empathize with your situation, but we worry about where you're going to find the resources with almost $20 billion of debt, a lot of challenges that don't have the funding base. Caroline, as deputy mayor, talked about how Amsterdam is using tax as a mechanism to enable things that perhaps weren't possible before or change behaviors. Maybe new taxes is not the discussion that Detroit wants to have, but it may be the only place where new resources can come. In the revitalization initiatives, are there some fresh ideas about the resources that need to be tapped that can be supplementary to the traditional city budget, which is in the red? Anybody there have a brainstorm? Aniela?
So I work at Next Energy. We work with technology developers, anywhere from university startups all the way to the big corporations. And I think we get this question a lot. And one of the important things to remember is that while the city may be bankrupt, there's still a lot of private investment being driven into the city. And you're seeing a lot of choices having to be made about what basic services are going to be built out in terms of infrastructure. And in some ways that can be a very good opportunity to understand where entrepreneurs or even established small businesses, large businesses, can play a role in providing those services and even financing them if you can establish metrics around the benefits, and especially metrics that then drive towards monetizing those benefits. And I think we are seeing that. And an example would be around smart parking. Detroit may not be in an opportunity right now where it can create a citywide smart parking environment. But we do have innovative pockets where you may not be able to reserve a parking spot, but you can, through the use of your smartphone, add time to your parking meter. And I think what those limited resources do is force choices to understand where are their value to citizens in the short term, and where can technologies, whether they be apps or additional hardware or sensors, fill those values. And if you can focus on those short-term gains, a lot of times the private sector will step in because they understand where there are opportunities to profit from those opportunities. And it may not be a tax solution, but I think that there are opportunities for the private sector in particular to step up and provide some of the investment into some of these new services.
It's very helpful.
I would just add.
Thanks, Aniela. Go ahead, Craig.
I would just add that I think it's a regional conversation. I think for far too long in and around Detroit, there's just been this discussion about city versus suburb. A lot of the reasons that Detroit is so devastated, as some people would characterize it, have to do with the movement of population from the center out towards the periphery. And so much of what's happening today, even when we talk about transportation, for example, there's a bus system that serves the city, and then there's a bus system that serves all of the surrounding communities. And there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, I think, to build bridges between the city and its suburbs around how our future is really a shared future. It's not us versus them. It's not either or. It's both and.
That's final
very
point.
Helpful. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the critical point here is this crisis is an opportunity for the city, and the municipal debt, is a significant issue that will get worked through. And I think what you see at this table is a set of actors that are driving forward significant change strategies in the whole city and on behalf of the region at large. And so that repositioning is really about, is the city attractive for new residents? Is it attractive for current residents? Is it a place that works? And so by delivering fundamental services and being really focused on those key elements, I think the bankruptcy 5 years from now will look as a strategic intersection for the city to move forward in a really thoughtful way.
Yeah, Gordon, there's a lot of innovation in infrastructure here. And so part of it's the financing of the city, and that's an issue. But I look at it from my transportation background. There's a brand new airport that's an international gateway that was built here recently and continues to be a viable asset. The ITS World Congress is coming here next year, just prior to the meeting of the minds, because of the test beds and development that's been done in the Detroit region. We're running transit connected vehicle technology in Ann Arbor. There's two major causes of fatalities in a transit system. Pedestrian steps at a crosswalk and the driver doesn't see him. Well, we're now set up signals so that the driver gets a warning when there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk and may be able to take some action to avoid a fatality. The other is turning left when a car is trying to go around. So putting sensors on the vehicle, and we set that track up in this region with investments from both the private and public sector to then deploy that to other cities around the world. So Detroit's got some major innovative activity underway.
Well, this theme of transportation innovation is a big theme in Amsterdam, and I'm hoping when we go back to Amsterdam, we'll be able to hear from some of the participants in the conference about how they see leveraging the investment in transportation innovation can also result in other benefits that are not necessarily side benefits or co-benefits. They're major benefits that are all sometimes not purely transportation related. But before we go back to Amsterdam for the open discussion in the conference room, I want to turn to Mr. Premack at the Barr Foundation in Boston to get a Bostonian point of view on this. We've heard some good perspectives from both Amsterdam and Detroit about what it means to be a smart, connected city, what the potential for revitalization is, and what the next economy looks like. Can you describe, perhaps from your point of view, what kinds of challenges, as seen from Boston, a smart city initiative would have to address if it was going to be a successful initiative in Boston?
Well, not that we're Detroit, but I think one of the biggest issues is the deputy mayor, when she discussed raising the parking rates from €3 to €5, yes, there were protests, but folks ended up being happy. In Massachusetts, we just passed a transportation finance bill this summer that raised the gas tax by 3 cents. It hadn't been raised in more than 20 years. It was a very small increase, and there's going to be a ballot item on the ballot a year from now that's going to try to repeal a key part of that bill, which was to tie the gasoline tax to inflation. Massachusetts has made a lot of progress. Don't have to tell anybody in this conference that we have a lot of innovation. But as I heard the deputy mayor and I heard the folks in Detroit, what crosses my mind is that there's sort of a chicken and egg scenario. Citizens will buy in if they see specific gains and specific contributions, that the quality of their lives are improved. They can find a parking place. Their buses run on time. They don't have to wait in the cold. And there are apps here that do that. Where the chicken and the egg comes in is you got to invest some public dollars. I love the idea of public-private cooperation, but you do have to have public investment. And it's a long history, but the public right now, it's certainly in Boston, liberal as Massachusetts is, and certainly across the United States, is in a very non-public spending mood. And I think one of the big challenges we have here in Boston, certainly in Massachusetts, excuse me, and I don't think it's unique to us, is how do you get people willing to do the investments necessary to get them to the point that they see the benefits of those investments? So it's a very slippery slope reverse problem that I would love to hear suggestions about how you achieve, because the political body is scared to death. To get only a 3-cent gasoline tax increase in Massachusetts when you had the business community supporting 15 cents was not exactly a stellar victory, though it's still better than nothing. And a Democratic-controlled state with a liberal governor, generally a liberal political establishment, was not able to get a greater increase for that out of political fear. So I don't mean to be Grinch at the party here on smart city growth, but until you have smart citizens willing to come along, and I'm not saying they're stupid, they just don't see the benefits, they don't see the delivery.
Well, this question that you've asked is maybe something where we need to now go back to Amsterdam and find out, is there something in the genes of the Dutch or something in the water, I suspect, that makes them
or the risk of water.
or the risk of water that makes them more willing to consider paying now for the investments that will make benefits possible tomorrow. You're describing, from your point of view in Boston, a disease which, is the short-termism that has afflicted the United States for a couple of decades at least. So maybe, Boz, I'll flip it back to you. We still need to talk to San Jose, of course, and more from Boston. But I thought at this moment, when we're addressing this question of the readiness to invest, the willingness to invest, the resistance to investment as themes that we're addressing in the United States, is this something where we have pearls of wisdom from the crowd that you've gathered in Amsterdam to help us understand it?
Well, no doubt there are several opinions here in the audience, but I'd first of all like to give this question to Caroline. Caroline, what would your first response be to that particular question?
Well, we were talking about political will and courage, and I think the most important thing is that you really deliver. You need to have good systems that deliver better mobility, better air quality, better circular economy, and then indeed it's at the end of the day quality of life. And that's a long-term investment. And I know politicians, I'm a politician myself, are always living up to the next elections. They will be here in March next year. But I think in 4 years you can do a lot as long as you are very specific about the results. And when you raise the parking taxes, but you have more air quality, more parking space, more parking below sea level in parking garages, a more green economy with electric vehicles, people see the benefits in 4 years. And we can share knowledge, we can use each other as examples. That's the reason why we started with Amsterdam Metropolitan Solution, because, for example, now we're busy with smart light. We have street lights. It's incredible how many investments that cost to change to a more sustainable street light system. And we cooperate in that as a city with Philips, with Cisco, with Alliander, it's energy supplier. But when it works in Amsterdam, it can work in Sao Paulo or Boston or Detroit as well. And then you have a good example, and then the people will believe you're more credible when it's proven.
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any questions from the audience, perhaps to this question in particular or other questions? You're very welcome. Wisdom of the crowds.
Well, you're all taxpayers. Maybe that's an interesting...
Do you mind having your taxes being dedicated to the applications of the kind that we are currently discussing in the public domain? Anyone?
All in favor of higher taxes. It's an interesting crowd.
Well, Boz, maybe while we're getting questions together from Amsterdam, Boz, I'll ask San Jose to chime in, because we have somebody who is an Amsterdammer who's based here in California, and who, although he represents the national government and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, he also is a taxpayer, and I hope he's not paying taxes in both the U.S. and the Netherlands, because that would be way too much to ask from Hugo. But Hugo, you've seen systems. You've traveled, obviously, and lived in multiple countries, both in California and in Amsterdam. You're involved in helping the Dutch partner with U.S.-based organizations, some of them nonprofits, some of them for-profit, some of them local governments. And you have a perception, I think, that's probably worth asking and diving into about the different perspectives that Dutch bring to this versus Americans bring to this. And I wonder if you could give us, your own perception as Consul General here in San Francisco.
Yes, thank you very much, Gordon. I'm indeed a kind of a go-between, or postillon d'amour, I say to my neighbor. Indeed, I see differences. On the one hand, in Amsterdam, I also had a lot of conversations with Caroline when I was still in the Environment Ministry. And it's the Ministry for Infrastructure and the Environment, which makes sense, perhaps, because that is one of the biggest challenges for the environment. it took me 1.5 hours to come here by car. And although this is the most innovative area I ever experienced, nevertheless, I went here by car, and it took me 6 lanes plus 6 lanes on the other side. It was only traffic jams. So there, I think the Netherlands, and particularly the metropolis Amsterdam, can be of service to have a multimodal approach there. More biking in the inner city, more high-speed rail, and the other way, I think the Netherlands also can give some experience how to do it better, because sometimes you go for the cheapest solution and it's not always the best solution. A lot of customers complain about that, but the other way around, I think indeed over here in Silicon Valley especially, there are a lot of new ideas, not only about electrical vehicles, but also about cars that can drive by themselves. I don't think that people like this, but perhaps they can drive a little bit from themselves and then they put in their destination. Then it's a matter of safety and environmental goal setting that the car gives much more information to the driver, and also for safety, as our colleagues from Detroit explained. So this is a combination. The last thing I wanted to say is I liked the words of Wim to move from the private-public partnership to the private-public let's say participation as in one company perhaps. We have them in my building. They are in the same floor. We give them free working place. It's a way of working together, incubators, as you call them here. Perhaps starting companies that are both with one leg in public service, or at least helped by the government, and then stand on their own feet after 2-3 months. You, Gordon, yourself are often our guest, and you are very critical about the success. It's perhaps only 10%, but we give them some working space at the 31st floor, which is the account number of the Netherlands.
Well, that's helpful because we have not yet really talked about the entrepreneurial economy and the emergence of young, disruptive companies who have innovative technology that are attempting to try and change the way that smart cities operate, or dumb cities become smart cities. Patrick Consorti is here representing Ile-de-France in the Silicon Valley area. This is the Paris region that has really become an incubator for innovative technology companies. Patrick has a smart cities program that he has built that links Silicon Valley back to Ile-de-France. Patrick, your point of view as another European looking at the crazy Americans and the way we do things.
Well, first of all, thank you, Gordon, to put this together, because what we're doing here is exactly part of the solution. We talked a lot about collaboration, and to be able to be in an assembly like this to share ideas is, I think, the first step. So, technology is really great to get people. And I would like to say a few things about collaboration. We talked about how the private and the public sector can team up together. We also talked about academia, where there's a lot of research. I'd like to add a 4th pillar that I think is really essential in this collaboration discussion here. And we've been working a lot on that particular topic. And the 4th pillar is the citizen or the consumer, depending on how you want to call this. And we've seen a lot of innovation coming out from the bottom up. And this is, I think, the big revolution we all are facing. And there is enormous amount of energy, innovation, and frankly, a free resource there available by just consulting or enabling the consumer, the citizen, to give a feedback. I'd like to point to a couple of examples. We all know the emergence of open data. Open data meaning transparency about publicly available data, and have everybody share this data and do something with that. We're very much involved in open data, and I'm sure Amsterdam has also an initiative on open data, making publicly available data, actually bringing it to the citizen. If you give this data to citizens, they'll figure out ways to analyze this and come up with solutions. But also, it's a process of democratization of urban data. I don't know if these three things get registered in your mind, but it's basically providing an infrastructure. And I think this is where the private sector can provide some good help. Is how about creating a publicly available compute infrastructure where a citizen could actually go in and consult data, call it big data or not big data, and actually give a feedback on a particular problem that is nagging him. It could be noise, for example, in the city. So collecting all the information through mobile technology, reporting it in a database, and making available a kind of a feedback loop. So this is where open data, citizen are collaborating to give a feedback, instantaneous feedback to the governing bodies. So the democratization aspect of it can actually have a big thread enabled by technology. The second point I wanted to precisely give on that experiment, we are conducting right now with UC Berkeley, it's University of California, but also some Institute of Research in France, in the Paris region, an experiment to democratize urban data by, in fact, concentrating on noise and collecting information on noise in several cities in the Bay Area and in Paris, making this data available to citizens and having them give a feedback of how they perceive noise as an environmental nuisance. But just to sum it up, I think that this social connection with citizens is really important, and maybe we're not that good at mobilizing, involving citizens in all these concepts of collaboration, and I think this is a big challenge for all of us.
Well, the citizen engagement theme has been, I know, a big focus of attention in Amsterdam, and we haven't, those of us who are sitting here in the U.S. and on the webcast haven't really heard much about the Amsterdam Institute for Metropolitan Solutions and how it will not only engage the partners in that consortium, but also engage citizens and corporates who participate as partners with this new initiative in Amsterdam. And I wonder, Bas, if now is a good time to maybe ask either Caroline or Ger to provide the rest of the world outside Amsterdam with a little summary of the initiative that was announced today. And it may be relevant to the discussion we have because the purpose of this new initiative is relevant to what we've discussed.
Caroline.
Thank you for that question, because we are really aware of the fact that the future is in cities. And we think that cities can help each other with their metropolitan solutions. As I explained, when this smart street light is working in Amsterdam, it can work in Sao Paulo or San Jose. And there was the basic idea combined with the fact that 1/3 of the Amsterdam economy was dependent on the financial and business services industry. And when in 2008 Lehman Brothers collapsed, it was a big threat for Amsterdam. And then we made a big analysis and we started to change, or we decided to change the focal point of our economy from financial and business services to more technique, innovation, research, development. And that was the reason why we started with the Amsterdam Metropolitan Solutions Initiative. And a third reason was that we really believe that cities have to connect. And when you are a connected city, you're in the flow of talented people, entrepreneurial people. And when you have a certain thrill, as Amsterdam has, you get the talented people not the whole year, but now and then. The young talented people are living and studying now in, example, Boston, Amsterdam, and Singapore. They live in 3 cities at the same time. And we want to be in that flow, and we have the infrastructure for that, not only the digital infrastructure, but also through the airport, Schiphol, and the Royal Dutch Airline, KLM. We are very well connected. So we want to be a connected, responsible city which is a pilot city, but also a rollout city for new metropolitan solutions.
So if I may add a question to that, because I think you've started a remarkably, potentially great and unique initiative, the Advanced Metropolitan Solutions Institute. It's a unique group of players coming together, trying to deliver on something very ambitious. You've been one of the main drivers behind all of this. It's without you, this probably would not have happened. In your own dreams, if you look 5 years ahead, in terms of the output, applications, smart citizens emerging from all of this, what have you not? What will AMS have produced by that time?
Improving the basic systems of the city here in Amsterdam, but also in other cities. And that's why we need to collaborate, because, for example, Cisco or Philips is active in 200 cities, I think. So when you want to improve the quality of life everywhere, you need the private companies. And in my dreams, the government is delivering, but also very competitive, that we deliver very good services, that all our citizens are happy with us. For example, 70 years ago, Amsterdam had a very long fish chain. People in Amsterdam love to eat fish, like they do in San Francisco, I think, and maybe in other cities, but the chain was too long, and the competition was not there, and the companies were not delivering. And then there was a deputy mayor who said, well, give me that fish delivery, and he brought the chain from 3 weeks to 1 day. So the fish is coming into the harbor in the morning, and in the evening we eat that fresh fish. So the people were really happy. And that's the level of ambition you have to have as a politician and as a actor in the government here. You have to be reliable in what you deliver, and that has to be the best. So that's my ambition, that we do that in Amsterdam, but also in other cities together with global acting companies.
Fantastic.
Can I ask?
Absolutely.
Add one thing, because what I also in this morning in this talk of I think Martin Heyer, he said it's not about improving things that are not going well. It's about radically changing things to that it's right, basically. So don't think about saving water when you could also choose not to use water when you go to the toilet to flush the toilet, basically. Yeah. So it's also about radically improvement. So the AMS Institute, I think, brings together some competence and some knowledge, companies, businesses, actually, but also the same as Think does, basically, in a less research approach, in a more practical entrepreneurial approach, I would say. Yeah. But brings together partners and parties that not only do it a bit better, but do it the right way. And I think it will be a big success for the AMS Institute, but when there were a few things we could radically change. Energy, I mean, not saving energy, but just use renewables. Mobility, I mean, not being less in a traffic jam, not being in a traffic jam or prevent traffic jams. I mean, so it's also about real radical doing things the right way and not a bit better or a bit less worse.
Well, that's a great point here, because I think 20 years ago we got to have the internet. Amsterdam can stay 25 years because you guys were the first to be connected to the US network, right? So that's where the internet got started in Amsterdam. But if you look back, if you would have asked a citizen 20 years ago, can you sort of try to imagine what the internet will deliver for you in 20 years from now? It would be virtually impossible to come up with the type of things that we think are pretty normal today. So if AMS can just start to produce some of the thinking and some of the solutions that we're going to potentially need and require down the road, and that's already a great step forward. Gordon, how much time do we have? Do we have one more question?
We have 15 and a half minutes, and I want to maybe switch from talking about what are the initiatives that enable smart city development in transport or in energy or in water, to maybe talking a little bit about how, because I see this Advanced Metropolitan Solutions Institute as getting us into the discussion about how to facilitate and how to enable city-to-city learning across city boundaries. So we're doing a little bit of this today, right? So we have a team in Detroit who are working very hard to revitalize and re-energize Detroit as a city. We have Boston, we have San Jose. We are obviously learning as we speak about the initiatives that Amsterdam has underway. I wonder if Amsterdam or other cities who are in this conversation have learned anything about how do we effectuate the learning process that we could maybe build on. So you're launching this new institute. It's going to bring the best practices and the best ideas from around the world to Amsterdam. Are you going to be doing something with that that's maybe a different mechanism, a different way of doing this that's not simply importing from some other city a great practice and then implanting it into Amsterdam, but maybe there's some co-production and co-development with other cities that will be undertaken? That's just an example of the kind of thing I'm fishing for here. I'm looking, in other words, for an understanding of how to do things differently that may speed up the process.
Is there anyone in the audience still who is working on AMS day and night, waking up with this? There are a number of people that were with us earlier today. Is there anyone who would want to respond to that? Because I think it's a great question in terms of the methodology, how we approach this. And if not, I'm going to ask Per whether you have a perspective.
Maurits, he's already...
Yes, Maurits, would you want to respond to that?
You can use the microphone on the... Yeah, perfect.
Introduce yourself.
Well, thanks. Maurits de Hoog, working at TU Delft and contributing to preparing this new institute, to building it. And I think the crucial thing is having people together, bring people in a new position. The universities of Wageningen and Delft are far away now from the city of Amsterdam. So I think the crucial factor will be bringing people to the city, bringing people to experiments, to the test beds, to the test sites now underway. Especially, we have seen some successful experiments in energy, for example, in the western part of the city, in the southeast part. Well, when we bring academia to these experiments and help them further, I think we can broaden the palette of solutions and speed up for our next generation. And then, the cooperation with other cities like Boston or Singapore or San Jose would be very inspiring for having a next generation solutions brought in the world as a whole. And that I think we should be very ambitious in bringing people together, bringing academia to the cities, and discuss solutions for the next generation.
Mark, please.
So maybe one of the things that we saw when we founded Think, and people started coming from all over the globe as participants in our programs, is that cross-fertilization that happens at one point starts spreading back. So earlier today, I talked about a couple of projects that came out of Think and ventures that we're now launching. So we're launching a series of ventures based on the programs that we ran with our participants. And because those participants fly into Amsterdam, collaborate on those ventures, all of a sudden when they go back home, those ventures by definition are international. So one of the ventures we launched, and Caroline is helping us, supporting us on that, is a venture called Control N, which helps us with office renewal. It's a venture that is not just here in Amsterdam, where it's launching at the moment, but it got announced last week in Shenzhen. So by definition, those kind of initiatives start globally, which helps, which makes it really advantageous for both us and the people who fly in and out.
Well, this theme of office revitalization and office renewal is relevant in lots of cities on the U.S. side and will be relevant to a lot of the people on the webcast because many cities overbuilt in some categories of grade A office space where banks were supposed to live forever, and now those banks are gone. And the reuse, the creative and adaptive reuse of those structures, rather than tearing them down, but finding new purposes for them is something which I think is an interesting area for conversation across the U.S.-European divide. We will probably be addressing that kind of theme in Detroit when we convene the meeting of the minds, how to take existing assets, repurpose those assets, make them continually valuable but at a different level. And we hope, of course, that the lessons that you learn in Amsterdam with a lot of underutilized office space could be replicated, could be scaled, could be transferred in dozens of cities around the world. So, Mark, we may come back to you about that and ask for your insights, perhaps on a guest blog post. I would encourage anybody who's listening and thinks that there's an idea like the creative reuse of unutilized office space that would like to consider, contributing a creative blog post to the cityminded.org website. We have Dave Hahn with us, who's the editor of that guest blog site, and we encourage you to think about that. So, Mark, we may come back to you with some request for a guest blog post on that question as part of the build-up to our discussion that convenes in Detroit in the fall. Let me turn now, perhaps, for a comment from Boston. We had your input earlier, and obviously the question you asked about are we ready to pay, are we willing to pay, is going to be a through line, a thread that we weave through all the discussions about smart transit, smart energy, smart water, smart buildings, the creative reuse of assets. Are there some closing thoughts that we can ask from Boston as we go around and start winding down our discussion that we can ask Boston to contribute right now?
Well, Gordon, I'm Joel Oliker for folks meeting me for the first time. Talking from the private sector and as an owner of a small business, I think one thing, obviously, we've just had a mayoral election here in Boston, and one of the primary issues was the quality of public education. Here in Massachusetts, we're very proud that our public education systems tend to be competitive globally, but I don't think that that's necessarily true in the United States in general. So, what we've witnessed, and I think what people are aware of, is that, you have a situation where if for the sustainability of cities, you need citizens who are committed to the city. And what happens is, cities are great at attracting young innovators, but when young families look for a school system, here in the States anyway, they tend to leave cities, go to the suburbs where there is a perceived higher quality of the public schools. So, the primary issues are public education, safety, income disparity, quality of housing. Those are some baseline issues which I think are probably a little thornier and harder to get touched by an iPhone app.
Well, this is the challenge for technology companies. I'm here representing a technology company, but I also care deeply about the issues you've described, not just as a parent and not just as a city dweller, but as somebody who's concerned that cities have to address these questions, which look from the outside as though technology may not necessarily provide much support. But I actually think it's a challenge for technologists to develop solutions that are going to be relevant to the kinds of things you've described, Joel. Thanks for that. Detroit, can we come back to you for closing comments or questions that you have for us to ponder as we continue this discussion in the months ahead?
Well, this is Paul Tolliver. One thing I can say is that we look forward to and welcome you for a meeting of the minds in Detroit. We have a lot of opportunity for reusing the space that you talked about, banks and just open space, because of what we are today geographically and physically. And we are looking at a lot of new ways to reuse a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the space that's available. And technology is a critical piece of that revitalization and that renaissance that we are experiencing and will be experiencing when you come to Detroit for the meeting of the minds.
I'd like to come back to the question that Boston raised. Are we ready to pay? And I think a key element of that is that we add value to the individual citizen. And I was reading a couple nights ago about one of our cities that had to do better analytics. They didn't have how much money they had because they had all these diverse data systems. So they created a consolidated data center. But out of that came several things that I think were valuable to the citizen. The police department could then respond to a call at a high-risk complex at 3 in the morning, and 8 o'clock in the morning they were sending a notice to the landlord that somebody was busted for dealing drugs out of that complex. And by 11, a notice was given to vacate. See, that adds value then to the community. The water district is expected to run efficient systems, but because the data was being collected at the individual level, a homeowner could then go to the database and check their own water usage and see if they had a leak. They could check it daily, weekly, monthly. So that was adding value from that investment for efficient operations to a value to the individual citizen from that investment. And I think that's something we have to keep in the back of our mind. How do we add value to the, in the technology side, the end user?
This theme has touched a big chord. I'm reading through the Twitter feed. We've had a couple of hundred tweets in the last hour plus, and two themes keep emerging from these tweets, and you can see them later and maybe verify this for yourself. One is that the approach that cities generally take, the top-down approach, has to be complemented and supplemented by the bottom-up, and that maybe technology can facilitate some meeting point in the middle where entrepreneurs and citizens and community activists who are not necessarily representing big institutions that have lots of resources are creating openings and utilizing data and making change possible, but that they have to meet the top-down policy framework, policy-making agenda, that has to be creative. Otherwise, there's a gap in the middle and they don't meet. This is one of the themes that keeps coming up, and I thought it would be relevant to the discussions we've had about different cities and their approaches to becoming smarter and connected and equitable. The other thing that's happened, which is interesting in the tweets, it's maybe a trending factor, is that the comment that came from the audience in Amsterdam about test beds and experiment sites in Amsterdam forced a bunch of Twitter followers to comment about their city's test beds. So I'm seeing one from Lake Nona. I'm seeing one from San Leandro, California, Lake Nona in Florida, San Leandro, California, Research Triangle in North Carolina. There seems to be a lot of energy and interest in this question of innovation clusters in cities or test beds and living laboratory environments in cities. Obviously, the Woodward Corridor story that we heard is to some extent an experiment in collaboration to create a new transit solution around which other innovations perhaps can be attracted. And I would encourage us, as we're thinking about some of the themes for the Meeting of the Minds in the fall, to look through these Twitter comments and to see if maybe I'm missing some of the really important gems. But I'd like to perhaps ask the folks on the stage in Amsterdam to give us their closing thoughts about what they would like to have in the way of conversations with other cities. Now that the Amsterdam Institute on Advanced Metropolitan Solutions has been launched, are there some very specific things that you would like to see coming into Amsterdam from outside the city that we sitting here in North America or the webcast participants around the world should keep in mind as we're thinking about possible collaboration with the city of Amsterdam? So maybe, Boz, do you want to take that as a closing thought for our day?
Well, first of all, I think that question really should go to Caroline. What do we expect? What do we want to get from other cities in terms of how this will benefit AMS and the overall smart city initiatives in Amsterdam?
Well, first of all, I think it's very good to talk about bottom-up movements. It's about a commitment of the citizens. And I always explain Amsterdam is a city of citizens. It's not a city of visitors or of companies. It's a city of citizens. That's the idea also behind I Amsterdam. We are responsible for the city of Amsterdam. And I think it's very good to exchange thoughts about that bottom-up and top-down interaction. And second, when we talk, for example, about education, I think we can learn a lot from each other. Primary education, secondary school, high-quality education, that's second. And then third, the creativity in all communities. How can we use that creativity? And I think the Americans are very good in that, as the Asians are, and we can learn a lot from them in that field of creativity and using that for the quality of the city and the quality of life.
Thank you, Caroline. Maybe I don't know if we have a minute for closing remarks on Ger and Mark.
We have 15 seconds, so somebody's with a closing jewel.
All right, Ger, you have any final?
Well, I think. Well, I mean, you should look at cities becoming more agile. So you get loads of things you would test and try out with local entrepreneurs, basically. But you need a bigger frameworks, and I think cities should learn from each other how to create a framework so you give local initiatives the opportunity to grow beyond its own city borders. And secondly, where did you get this mug, Gordon? I really love your coffee mug, actually, which is in the screen the whole time. Perfect.
Well, on this pleasing note, I'll say thank you to our colleagues in North America, our colleagues in Amsterdam. Hopefully some new friendships and new collaboration has been formulated. I'll say thanks to TPEX, the organization in Amsterdam that enabled us to see you, our friends in the Netherlands, and thanks to Cisco for providing the television infrastructure and the telepresence rooms. Thanks to Meeting of the Minds for convening all of this. Please be sure to check cityminded.org to look at the program that's being put together and the discussion that's underway about the plans for Meeting of the Minds going to Detroit in the fall. And we welcome your comments. We welcome your inputs. We welcome your tweets. This will be posted on video for you to share with colleagues, and we encourage you to keep the conversation going. We'll do our part. We hope you'll do your part, and we thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Gordon. And let me, I don't know whether we're going to get cut off, but let me close at our end the proceedings as well. First of all, Gordon, thank you, doing a great job in moderating 5 cities in one go in the United States. That's a great job. Thank you for all the participants at the telepresence locations in US cities. I know that at the Californian side, you had to be in there at 7:30 a.m., which is pretty radical. So thank you for coming out. That's great stuff. I would like to echo the word of thank you to TPEX. TPEX has provided this great experience. Telepresence is technology, Cisco produces it, but doesn't service it. That's something that TPEX does. They do that on a global level. They're a global player. Even the Vatican is hiring them.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much for your participation.
But it's a Dutch company, so it's something to be proud of. TPEX, great job. Obviously, I would very much like to thank everybody here. Thank you for sticking around for such a long time. It's 6:30 in the evening. That's it's pretty steep. Thank you for being here. Madam Deputy Mayor, dear Caroline, thank you very much for being here for all this time. Great to have your insights. Ger, Mark, great job today. Thank you for all of your incredible efforts in making this fly. Great round of applause for everybody. Thank you.
Applaus for Bas.
And Bas, thank you as well for hosting this. So, really, thanks for all. We started out with 200 people, but I mean, it's a long day being 9.5 hours over here. So to understand, the good news is that there is extra beer for everybody who stayed over here right outside. So.